Well, welcome everyone. It is 6 o'clock, and today I am honored and excited to present this session to you guys. I'm Anita Roberts, Executive Director of Made Media Group. We're a 501c3 nonprofit designed to empower Black communities through education, media, and technology. I'm also the Managing Director of Silicon Hills Capital, which specializes in narrowing the gap to capital for Black and women-owned businesses. I am so pleased to host this first session of the B.O.B. Incubator and just excited at the response that we've received from the community. We have almost 50 small business owners who are signed up in this inaugural cohort. So we are all excited we're ready to get started. So first, I don't think our sponsor is here. Let me see. There he is. Brandon is here. Yay! I didn't see you. Awesome. Well, I'm going to do my intro for Brandon. So I'm going to take this time to present our sponsor, which is Comerica Bank. We have Mr. Brandon Hugh Jones. He's Vice President of the Texas External Affairs Market Manager. For more than a decade, Brandon has been a proven leader in financial services and community development. In his role at Comerica Bank, he focuses on creative and innovative ways that the bank can enrich communities through philanthropy, community engagement, and financial education. Brandon Jones.
Thank you so much, Anita, and thank you all, everyone here, Francis, Dr. Miles, Ms. Jones, everyone who really made this happen today and kind of pulled together as a community to make sure that we're getting the education out to those folks that need it the most. We kind of started these boot camps last year in 2020 as a response to COVID-19's crippling effect on small businesses. And we've really seen these grow, and we've really seen a great response from our communities nationwide. To date, we've done about, the tally keeps going up, but I believe about 115 of these boot camps across the nations with various partners. And we've touched about somewhere between about 1,300 businesses, and that number just went up last week because we just wrapped it with Dallas Black Chamber of Commerce in Dallas, Texas, and Dallas market. So we're really excited. Please get all of this information, bring more folks in, share the information. We really want businesses in our communities to prosper and to grow. And thank you again, Anita, so much for getting this ramped up in the Austin market. We really appreciate you and all your help. And without further ado, take it away.
All right, thank you, Brandon. Again, thank you. Brandon, as he said, he's actually been instrumental in putting these types of things together. So we really appreciate Comerica for leading the way and showing that Black-owned businesses are important in our community. So we appreciate you. Throughout this evening, you'll see members of our staff. You'll see Miss D. Jones. It's got Tequila Jones up in the top left corner. She is, and Rebecca Poe. Rebecca will not be on screen because I think she's at a soccer game with her little one. So, but they'll be monitoring the chat throughout the evening. So if you have any programmatic questions, you can put those in the chat. However, if you have questions for the panelists, please put those in the Q&A. There is a Q&A button at the bottom. So let's kick this off. So we have two dynamic speakers for you tonight that we're opening this cohort up for. We've got Dr. Alvin Miles. He is CEO of Miles Management International and the founder of the Mid-Career Professionals Leadership Network. He's a strategic advisor, organizational expert, and executive coach who focuses on diversity, equity, and inclusion in organizations. Alvin is a retired corporate leader from Bell South AT&T and was the director of the Executive MBA program at Kennesaw State University. Next, we have Dr. Frances Leos Martinez. She is a clinical professor at the University of Texas School of Law, teaching in the Entrepreneurship and Community Development Clinic, which she co-founded in 2006. Just a few of her areas of focus include small business, nonprofit, and social enterprise. She was previously a senior staff attorney at Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid, TRILA, I think is what most people know, and Director of Texas Community Building with Attorney Resources, a business law pro bono program serving nonprofits engaging in community development. So like I said, I mean, their credentials are way long. So we're just excited to have them both. And you'll hear from Dr. Miles first and then Dr. Martinez. So let's get to it. Just a couple of housekeeping announcements. Again, please post your questions using the Q&A feature and not in the chat, because we want to be able to get those questions answered, as well as if you have, there will be some time at the end of the presentations for the panelists to answer questions that you may have for them. Also, I forgot to say that at the end of the 4 weeks, because this is a series of classes over the next 4 weeks, we are going to be awarding, because I'm always loving to give Black businesses checks, because you know, a lot of times we don't get those. So we're going to give 10 Black businesses $500 each. So we just, you know, but you have to attend each of the sessions. And Miss Daquila Jones, I don't know, just to tell you a little bit about Daquila, she is a retired lieutenant colonel, so she will make sure you guys are doing what you're supposed to do. So make sure, I think she put a sign up sheet in the chat. Did you put it in the chat or in the questions, Daquila? In the chat. Okay, so there's if you scroll up, it says, please complete the attendance at the link, and she will do that throughout the night. So we want to make sure that you're there, you're engaging in the conversation, so we will get it started. Oh, one more thing, just to kind of give you a quick rundown of the schedule. Our first class will start in a few minutes, and it'll go for about 15 minutes. And then the second class will be about another 30 minutes. And then we'll have 25 minutes for you to ask questions. And that should take us to about 7:30. Tonight, we're opening up with how to set up your business. So in the chat, if you guys don't mind, tell us what kind of business you have, so that Dr. Miles and Dr. Martinez can see what you guys are working with. All right, without further ado, Dr. Miles, take it away.
Well, thank you, Anita, and welcome to all of you and also thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us on this boot camp. What's important about what you're doing is that you're stepping out, and you actually need to be commended for doing that. Some of you obviously have had businesses for quite a while. I see Gregory saying he has a photography business, computer repair company, and Candace has a teacher boot camp, and I'm sure the list goes on and on. But one of the major questions that I would have for you, and I'm sure that I'd love for you to take back, is how will you know? There's 4 basic things that I'd like you to take a sheet of paper out wherever you are and just write these 4 things out. Is your business, is your offer, is your product, is your service, is it repeatable? Is it sustainable? Is it valuable? And most importantly, is it predictable? And so what we're going to do is we're going to walk you through a business model in the time we have. Business model, not a business plan. They're 2 distinct things, because a business model itself will be describing the rationale of how your organization not only creates, but delivers and captures value. And of course, that's what people are paying for. That's why you're in business. And so let us begin. So I will start with a screen share, because I want you to see this model that I have already zeroed in on. And let's take a peek at this. So to show you at a high level, this is the business model canvas we'll be walking through. And as you see, my expectation that you'll take the time after we complete our conversation tonight, you'll take the time and walk through, and from left to right, who are your key partners? What are your key activities? What are your key resources? What are your value propositions, your customer relationships, your channels, your customer segments, cost structure, and revenue streams. But it wouldn't be fair for me to just put the business model canvas in front of you without actually walking you through how to fill that out. And so what I do is I start in the middle of the canvas. In the middle of the canvas is with the value propositions, and then we work ourselves to the right side, and then we finish up on the left. And so if I'm keeping myself worthy of watching the time, I've got about 13 minutes left. So I'll walk you through as much as I can, and then we'll have time for questions and answers at the end. But again, what I want you to keep in mind when you see this whole business model and your whole idea of what you need to be putting in this to really describe what you're doing, what I'd like you to do is focus on one item, not many items. Again, I recognize in the chat that we've got some folks that are doing a variety of different things. So it gives more of an opportunity for you to zero in on each particular item, or no telling how many businesses you have, but let's just focus on one. And so let's start again with value propositions. And as you can see, the questions populated there on your top left of your screen. First of all, what makes your particular product or service unique? Are you offering some special type of boutique service? Are you offering special cakes? Are they certain flavorings? Are they gluten-free? What is it that you're delivering? So that first question, what value do you deliver to the customer? So what is it uniquely that you do? And more likely than not, typically customers are out there looking for something to help them solve a problem. So if they're hungry, they're looking for a variety of restaurants. I know when we go out to eat, the question then becomes, is it seafood? Is it steak? Where are we going to sit down and watch? Are we going to watch television while we're dining? Or we want fine dining? Or casual dining? Do we want drinks, etc.? And so those are questions that customers are asking. The question to you is, which one of your customers' problems are you trying to solve? And which products and services are you offering to your segments? And again, when you think of all the things you do, and I'm sure you do a lot, what we really want to zero in is on one of those particular things. One of the things I saw in the chat was, I think Gregory had a photography business. So what product and service is Gregory offering to his customer segments? So when you get the template, again, I'll make sure that you have that in the chat or later as a resource. We want you to go through and fill this out, take the time to walk through it, and make certain you're actually giving your attention to these various boxes and segments, because they'll help you to really understand what it is you're bringing to the customer, what the customer is asking for, and at the same time, who are the people that are supporting you in what you're doing? And we'll talk more as we move through that. So value propositions is where you begin, because it all starts with you. You're the one who are taking the risk. You're the one who's sticking yourself out, putting yourself out there and saying, hey world, what I'm doing is working perhaps on a small scale, and now it's time for me to grow. And I really want to take this to you as a customer base. And so here's what I'm offering. Hello world, right? So the value proposition is first. So next we step over to the right to customer relationships. So first question, what type of relationships do our customers expect us to establish and maintain with them? Is it a direct relationship, or is it an indirect relationship? If it's a direct relationship, then of course, you're either reaching out via Facebook, you're reaching out person to person, or you're reaching out in a variety of different ways that you keep contact with them. If it's a indirect relationship, then it's perhaps something that you're putting on Amazon or eBay or Etsy or any of the variety of different areas where you can actually sell a product or sometimes even sell services through someone else. And so when you look at, how costly are these relationships? What are they costing you? Especially when it comes to indirect relationships. I recall that there were a series of books being sold, and the books could be sold direct, but at the same time, the books were replenished every year. So you had the first edition, the second edition, the third edition. Well, when you get down to the third, the fourth, the fifth edition, how do you then reduce the inventory on the first edition? Well, there's a variety of different ways to do that. One of those ways, of course, is to use a service. In eBay for second sellers or first sellers, or Amazon, and those come with a price. So look into those prices and determine where they are. So you see a variety of different examples in there, a couple of different topics and targets to think about as well. But that's the customer relationship primer, just to kind of get you going with customer relationships. And then next on the right side there, on top right, is the customer segments. So when you think about who you're presenting your product and service to, who are you creating value for? Who are your most important customers? Are these customers, are these the folks that you've been doing business with for quite some time? Is it family and friends that you've been doing your photography for? Or are you looking to branch out? Are you looking to stay in what you see beneath there with the customer segment types? Are you looking to stay in a niche market? Is the product that you're selling such that only a small group of people in a targeted group of an area, the niche, what we call a niche market, or is it in a mass market? Is it something that most people would find valuable? Typically, if I'm looking at cakes, I'm thinking that cakes would apply to the mass market, but it just depends. You need to make certain that you're looking and thinking through who you're making your product for, who you're actually marketing to, and how you're creating value. I see a poll just popped up, and I'm remove that poll down. Next is distribution channels. So through which channels do your customers want to be reached? If you find that the majority of your customers are on Facebook, then why are you even trying to get an Instagram channel unless you're trying to set up a different set of distribution channels? But again, if you're focused on the model and what works best, then you start honing in on where reality sits. So which channels are your customers today? How have you typically reached them? And if you're going to be reaching out to them, which ones do you think are going to end up being more cost effective for you? Because that's where your customers are buying. And so you want to spend your time where the customers are, not trying to get the customers to move to you, if that makes sense. So at this point, we're going to move to the left side of the screen, keeping the value propositions on the top right. And we've got a little over 5 minutes left. So we're pretty much right on target. So now we start looking at, we looked at the customer side of the equation, and we looked at who you're going to be marketing to, where you're going to be reaching out to them, et cetera. But what happens when it comes to the supply side of your business? Who are your partners? Who are people that you're going to be going into business with? The second question is, who are your key suppliers? So if you need to make, as your business grows, for example, if you're a photography business, or keeping with the cake example, where are you getting your suppliers from? How can you be sure that those suppliers are going to be there for you when you need them? Are you going to a store, a wholesaler? Are you getting them delivered to you? Do you have some type of relationship with these folks, just to make certain that you're not able to offer something that you can't deliver? And what are the resources that you're acquiring from them? And when you look at the costs, what are those costs? And can those costs really be pared down? We want you to think about not only just where you're getting your information, your products, et cetera, and then you take those products and put it in a unique package that we then call your value proposition. Again, this is how all this model ties together. But so what are the type of partnerships that you have with them? Is it a strategic alliance? Is it a 50-50 share? Are you just buying it at wholesale and selling at retail? Is there the co-opetition piece of it? Is not only are you competing against someone, but you're also working with them at the same time in kind of a joint function. So are there joint ventures as well, where you both go into business together and you say that what we want to do is make certain that we're sharing customers, because sometimes there's an add-on. And so what are those buyer-supplier relationships, that the partner piece of it, we need to make certain that you're keeping in mind and you're really thinking through and you're making certain that you've got your eyes on that particular piece. When you move to the right side, the next box is key activities. So what key activities do our value propositions require? So if you hold up your left hand, that is your particular value proposition, in the way you put your product and service together and go to market. And on the right hand is how you actually deliver that, and I've got another little thing popped up here, how you deliver that, how you collect the money, how you transact the business, but in the middle is a value chain. And how you make sure that value chain is as tight as it can be, or the distribution channels, your relationships, and how you collect the money. So for example, if you transact business, are you taking orders over the phone? Do people show up at your food truck? What are a variety of ways that you actually take the order? Then are you using technology when it comes to being able to take that order, log that order, keep a receipt of that order? How are you not only getting the order, logging the order, but taking that order and putting it in such a way that you know who was first? How do you deliver? How do you make certain that the customer gets what it is they asked for? Where's the quality control involved in it? So what is the value chain? What ends up happening from the time something is ordered to the time something is delivered? And last but not least, what are the key resources? So what key resources does your value proposition require? So when you look at the 4 types that we've got listed, human, physical, intellectual, and financial, human resources are as simple as those folks that work with you. And of course, you being there, is it required that you're there? Do you have a team in place such that if you have to go out and get or replenish your supplies, you can do that and not have a drop off in the business and not have nobody there? Are you a one-person band? If that's the case, then make certain you list it on the business model and make certain that you get a very good view of what it is that you're offering, how you're offering it. So what are the physical resources? Do you have a food truck? Do you have camera? Do you have all the physical equipment it takes to be able to deliver on that product? Are you renting those things or are you buying it? That goes into the cost structure. So what's the intellectual property in terms of a resource? The third bullet point is your unique way of doing things such that you've got a patent on it. And if you don't have a patent on it, is that something you need to consider? And last but not least, your financial resources, which is typically where a business plan comes in, but you would want to understand as you move through and populate this particular business model for you, that no one particular business is the same as any other. We're all slightly different, mainly because of the number one thing, which is that value proposition. So I moved through this fairly quickly. You can see my screen. I also am going to make certain that you get the business model canvas template as well as this example. And I'll make myself available should you have any more questions, and I can help you with it further. But hopefully I'm on target. Back to you, Anita.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we will go ahead and move into Dr. Martinez. Are you ready to go?
Thank you so much. I am just, I'm sharing right now in the chat a link to a list of legal resources that will provide some additional information to topics that I'll cover today. I'm sharing the screen just to show what that list looks like. In it are state and federal websites that may be helpful to you as you are setting up your business. Also, I'm putting up some forms and guidance that have been prepared by attorneys and are made available to the general public. The top two are put together by two law firms that do a lot of business with starting entrepreneurs. And the third one is actually one of our peer legal clinics at University of Pennsylvania, who have a terrific website of lots of different forms. I'm also putting up a couple of resources that were created for nonprofit organizations, but have excellent operational guidance that applies to any kind of a business. And then finally, I'm posting up resources for pro bono and reduced fee legal assistance that is available here in Central Texas. So happy to ask further questions as we move through the evening. And I'm going to switch my screen now. I'm going to stop this one and pull up a PowerPoint presentation. Great. Well, building on the foundational pieces that Dr. Miles laid out, another thing you want to be thinking about is how you're going to build your legal strategy. Your legal strategy is one of your important protective strategies that will help you start, grow, and at some point transition your business, exit your business, hand your business off to family members or to employees within the organization. Often lawyers are the last to be invited into a business startup situation. Not blaming anybody for doing that. I think we have earned our reputation of coming in and telling you, well, you might want to stop and think about this. I am going to do a little bit of that tonight, but my clinic does work with founding businesses, both for-profit and nonprofit. We take a joy in working with small business owners who are creating their businesses. It's a pleasure every day to be a part of our practice. And part of that is learning to work with businesses to help them manage risk, protect them, but not stop them from doing what they're passionate about, helping them grow that way. Just, the legal disclaimer that we put on everything. I will make these slides available after the presentation as well. Remember that you can really build your foundation, make it really strong with good legal planning. Starting with form of business. I saw in the poll that many of you have already formed an entity. We're going to talk tonight about just a very brief introduction to the key business entities that are common when you're setting up your business. And also, just as Dr. Miles said, there's a lot of information here. Some I may not get to completely. I will move through some of this pretty quickly and happy to answer additional questions when we get to the Q&A period. And so moving through business entities, when you start your business, you are already a sole proprietor. That is considered a form of business. You don't have an entity that you file, but there is a great deal of business building that you can do as a sole proprietor. So that's something to keep in mind. And many businesses sometimes are best served by remaining sole proprietors for a period of time as they build their business model and build their business plan. Important thing to remember about the sole proprietor is that the business is not separate from the individual. The two are interchangeable. One place this is really seen is when it comes to filing income tax, where the taxes for a sole proprietor are filed with an individual return. There is no paperwork required to form the sole proprietorship. I'll mention this, I'm going to come back to this. One, you will often hear that as a sole proprietor, you're not separating yourself from the liability of your business as well. And that is absolutely true. I'm going to have a little bit of a caveat to that when we move a few slides further down. So general partnership, I noticed that I believe that some of you posted limited partnership. A general partnership is something that sometimes is intentional, but also sometimes happens by accident. So a general partnership is formed when you have two or more individuals who are operating a business together. And like a sole proprietorship, there is no separation between the partnership and the individual. So there's no separate entity. Um, each each partner acts as an agent of the business and has the ability to bind the other partner into contracts that they set up and agree to. All the partners are responsible for business debts, and each partner reports their share of business income on their individual tax returns. Paperwork does not need to be filed. It is highly recommended that if you are in a general partnership and choose to remain there, that you put together a written partnership agreement to make clear what the understanding is between the partners. You will often be cautioned against a general partner and encouraged to form an entity if you are operating a business with another person. But there are many businesses that operate as general partnerships with written agreements, and have been very successful with that business form. Corporations are a well-known business form. We'll talk about different types of corporations, but essentially the basic definition of a corporation is that it's a business entity. It's formed by filing a certificate of formation with the Secretary of State. The corporation is owned by its shareholders, and shareholders elect directors and officers to manage the entity. Corporations can be very large. They can also be very small. And in Texas, when a corporation is small, the corporation has the option of acting almost as a partnership in terms of its bylaws and its agreements that it puts together with shareholders. One of the benefits that you often hear about a corporation is that it separates the liability for business debts away from the individual. So the shareholders, the owners, are generally not personally responsible for the business debts. A corporation has to follow corporate formalities. It sounds frightening, and it sounds like a lot of paperwork, and it can be if you make it that way. There's a requirement. It's governed by the Texas Business Organization Code. Corporations have requirements about holding meetings or taking actions by written consent in compliance with their bylaws. Corporations have to keep accurate minutes and other books and records. A corporation does have some flexibility in setting its bylaws, and so you can take those formalities and make them a little simpler to work with, but it does require a certain level of paperwork that sole proprietorship and general partnership, frankly, do not require. As we go through some of the different types of corporations, some of these different types of corporations, designations relate to the tax treatment. So the C corporation is the corporation that you'll hear discussed as publicly traded, large corporations, and also corporations that are attractive to venture capital investors. One of the biggest negatives you hear about corporations is that they are subject to double taxation, which means that the business income is taxed at the corporate level, but also distribution to shareholders are taxed on an individual level. This is true. This has been less onerous with the change in the tax law, which lowered the corporate tax rate. But one thing to consider as well is that sometimes at the very start, corporations don't break even. So there may not be a huge tax burden on a corporation that is just getting started. One benefit of a corporation is that it can retain some of its earnings within the corporation and not distribute them as almost a savings account for the corporation, so that the corporation will need to pay business taxes, but if it's not distributing it, you're avoiding that double taxation piece. As a filing entity, a corporation is subject to the Texas business income tax, which they refuse to call an income tax. And so the term used is franchise or margin tax. That becomes applicable when an entity has over $1 million of taxable income. So often not an issue for founding businesses. Again, a C corporation is formed by filing the certificate of formation with the Secretary of State. The link to the Secretary of State that's included in the resources is a link to the forms that need to be filed, but in addition, a lot of instructions and FAQs put together by the Secretary of State, which can be quite helpful. The S corporation is a form that's frequently recommended to small businesses, and before LLCs, which we'll get to in a minute, really became popular, S corporation was the form of choice for a small business. So the identifying characteristic of the S corporation is that it also has pass-through taxation the way a partnership does. So it, unlike a C corporation, so it's taxed at the individual level and not at the corporate level. It is also subject to, as a filing entity, the Texas franchise or margin tax. A benefit of the S corp, which is a reason that it is sometimes still recommended depending on the type of business, is that the corporation allows some of the income to individuals who work for the corporation to be treated as salary, and the corporation is able to pay payroll taxes and treat them as corporate expenses. Before the change in the tax law, that often resulted in a savings of over $5,000 to business owners. It's become less since the tax law, but accountants will frequently work with you to help you determine which is the best taxation choice for you. Some of what are considered the downsides of the S corporation form are that there are some restrictions on investors, including there is a limit on shareholders. So has to be 100 or fewer shareholders. Shareholders have to be US attorneys, and LLCs and other S corps and corporations cannot be shareholders within an S corp. The S corp is also a filing entity that is created by filing a certificate of formation with the Secretary of State. It's a two-step, in this one, it's a particular two-step process to form the S corp. First, the corporation is filed at the state level, but then there's a subsequent step of filing an S election with the IRS, which will add on the S-corp treatment. So you can't go into the Secretary of State and look for a certificate of formation for an S-corp. You file the general corporation certificate of formation and become an S-corp with your S election. Now, this election with the IRS can be overlaid with an LLC, which we'll get to. Before I move away from corporations, I want to talk about one of the newer corporate forms in Texas, which is used by social enterprises. And this is a public benefit corporation. And so typically you will often hear that a corporation exists to maximize profit to shareholders. And while there's been some pushback by the Chamber of Commerce on that definition of corporation, there has been created this other entity that makes it clear that within this corporation, there is a public and social mission as well as a profit mission. So a public benefit corporation is very similar to a C corporation in terms of taxation, in terms of having to create bylaws. Some of the differences are that the board of directors and the officers do have to consider the social purpose, the public benefit of the corporation as they engage in their business decisions. And they have to provide a report to shareholders to show that they're meeting their public mission. The term public corporation can be attractive to certain type of social impact investors, and also to some business. It can also be really attractive to some customers who are really looking to have dealings with entities that also have a social or public purpose as well. I saw that I think 70% of the respondents to the poll that we just had have formed LLCs. And so LLCs are limited liability companies are also filing entities that are formed by filing a certificate of formation with the Secretary of State. Also subject to the Texas margin franchise tax. Again, over $1 million is where you need to reach before you have a tax liability at the state level. The owners of an LLC are referred to as members. It is possible for an LLC to have only one member. LLCs are not required to have operating agreements, but it is highly recommended, especially if there are more than one member, if there's more than one member in an LLC. If an LLC does not have a company agreement, it is bound by the rules that are contained within the Texas Business Organizations Code. And one of the particular pieces in the Business Organizations Code is that unless there's a company agreement, or an operating agreement is another term that we use, stating differently, members cannot withdraw from the company. This is meant to protect the company so that a member just doesn't withdraw and take out what they have put into the company. LLCs are highly popular because while they have some corporate formalities, they can be quite streamlined, and they can really be established to really be very flexible and to really work at what works best for the members. There's not a standard set of bylaws that you typically refer to. LLC should still keep good corporate records, and it's still important to remember that since the LLC is a separate entity, this is especially true for business accounts. The personal and business financial accounts should really be kept separately so that money doesn't just transfer between the two with no record of why this is happening, because that can lead to a loss of the corporate protection that you receive. LLCs also have a choice of tax treatment. An LLC can be taxed as a sole proprietor if it has only one member. It can be taxed as a partnership if it has more than one member. It can also choose, and when it gets taxed as a partnership, that's essentially making an S-corp election, or it can be taxed the way a C-corp is. So that you can get the tax treatment of and the ability to retain earnings within the LLC, but still have the flexibility of running meetings and having your paperwork be determined by the LLC rules. We have a few more minutes. So one thing I really want to talk about, you will often hear that it's really important to form an entity to reduce your liability. That is generally a true statement, but there are some limits to that. So entities provide protection. Entities that file forms with the Secretary of State provide protections from business debts unless the owner or owners are required to give a personal guarantee. For starting businesses, it is often true that a loan to a starting business might require a personal guarantee. Many commercial leases also require personal guarantees. So in that situation, the entity does not give protection. And an owner remains responsible for any tort that they have. Tort is that legal term for damage to another person or property. An owner cannot shift that liability to a business entity, so they hold on to that. And again, not respecting the corporate formalities, essentially treating the entity as interchangeable with yourself, results in a loss of that liability. I also want to talk briefly about DBAs. So any business that is operating in a name not their own, so if it's a sole proprietor or a partnership, if it's operating in the name, if it's not using the legal name of the individuals involved, it will need a DBA. If it's an entity, but the business name, the public face name is different from the name of the entity that's registered with the Secretary of State, it will also need a DBA. DBAs are now only filed with the Secretary of State. There is sometimes a misconception that filing a DBA gives a business ownership of that name. That is not true. The DBA is about protecting the public so that the public knows who they're dealing with. And many businesses can have the same DBA. So many businesses can operate under the same name as far as the DBA is concerned. And then a last, just a last comment before we move away from entities, which is that independent contractors can be any kind of an entity. An independent contractor refers to an employee relationship, so that if it's a person is an independent contractor and not an employee. But independent contractors can also be companies. And the distinction is that it becomes more clear for individuals. Independent contractors do not have payroll taxes deducted from the companies that hire them. They're sometimes called the 1099 worker because of the IRS form that's paid when there's a certain amount of work and pay that is done. I want to switch briefly and talk about a couple of operational items that you want to think about at the start too. So one is, do you actually need a license or permit to operate the business that you are operating? There is no general license or permit required that you have to operate a business in Texas. But many specific types of businesses do require licenses or permits, including food and alcohol businesses, salon services, and daycare or childcare businesses. So you want to be sure to check with state and local government requirements to see what licenses and permits are needed to operate your business. You also want to check zoning rules, especially if you're operating a home-based business or you're thinking of signing a commercial lease to operate your business, to make sure that you're able to do the business you would like to operate on the piece of property that you live in or are contemplating renting. All businesses that sell, most businesses that sell products or services are going to need sales tax permits, which you can obtain from the Texas Comptroller's office. Just a couple of words about insurance. So you want to start early, talk to small business incubators and friends, talk to your network to get connected with a really good insurance broker. This is going to be one of your best friends in running your business. Insurance remains one of the best ways to protect yourself from liability. It is expensive, we recognize that. So what you want to do is, so first of all, determine if you have to carry insurance. If you're running a particular type of business with a particular type of permit, you might be required to carry insurance. You might have signed a contract that requires insurance, including a lease. When you're thinking about insurance, you want to think about the biggest risk to your business, and then buy the best insurance that you can afford. So you want to think about where is it possible for someone to get hurt, and what is the kind of insurance that's going to cover it. We're often talking about general commercial liability for starting businesses, although depending on the type of business, you might want to look at different types of insurance. And you really want to read your policy carefully, because you really want to make sure you know what is covered and especially what is not covered, and how particular losses are valued. I think a lot of businesses were really hard hit when COVID hit and the pandemic hit, with insurance policies that actually had some language that allowed them not to cover COVID-related losses. Dr. Miles talked about intellectual property, and I want to take just a few minutes to quickly scan the IP world a little bit, and again, can answer more questions when we get to Q&A. IP is one of your most valuable assets as well, and many businesses start to create IP very early on as they move forward. The key ones I'll talk about today are trademark, copyright, and trade secrets. Trade secrets is IP that is created around how you do your business, the things that are necessary for your business, things that you keep secret. The reference we are usually given is Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola chose not to patent the Coca-Cola formula because it would have to make it public, and instead has for decades, is it a century now? I'm trying to think of how Coca-Cola is, has kept the trade secret of that recipe. Trade secret is business information that is non-public, and in order to be considered a trade secret, and you can go after people for taking your trade secrets, the business has to make sure that it's taken steps to protect the trade secrets. Common ways of doing this are to put controls within your business. It can be as simple as having a filing cabinet and making sure your recipes or some of your key business information is in that filing cabinet, and having the digital equivalent. Make sure that access to some of your information is made available only to employees who really need it. So employee guidelines are another way to protect your trade secrets. It is good to put notifications on documents to show that you intend to keep these secret. You can also put together contracts that protect trade secrets. NDAs are probably a document that you have heard about. NDAs are very common with employees, but also as you start to collaborate with another business, many businesses will ask each other to sign NDAs. The legal resources that I put out, the lawyer websites, Cooligo, DLA Piper, but also that Stanford Mills Clinic, have great examples of NDAs that are quite easy to adapt and use for many different types of businesses. So you want to really think about those. Just examples of trade secrets are recipes, customer lists, client lists, your marketing plans, that business model, if you're starting to develop it, designs that you have. These are all considered trade secrets. Copyright is something that businesses often start. If you have a website, you may have already created content that is protected by copyright. Copyright protects the original authors of original works of authorship. And I have the legalese language up here, a tangible medium of expression. What that means is copyright doesn't protect ideas, it protects the thing. So if you have a website and you've created a blog on your website, copyright protects what is written on your website, the design that you have on your website. So have here some of the copyright rights about producing, distributing, displaying. And then a simple step that you can take is to use that copyright symbol. That C inside the circle is the most common way to do this, including the year that this work was first published and the name of the owner. That's a simple, you don't have to do this to have copyright. Copyright attaches at creation whether or not you have a notice. But a notice sets the expectation for the public that you are serious about protecting your work. It's also important not to infringe on others' copyrights. I will stop with this last one of trademarks. So building your brand is something you're working on from the very beginning. And you are developing names, you might be developing slogans, a logo. These are your marks. Trademarks, if it's about a good, service mark, if it's about a service. Some marks can't be registered because they're too generic. So if you are selling apples and you name your company Apple, you can't register. You will have no protection, whether it's federal registration or common law. On the other hand, Apple computers, the name Apple for a very different type of product did meet the trademark rules. But if you have a name that is able to be trademarked, one of the things that you want to do, or even if you don't know if it's trademark, is when you're setting up the name for your business, it's a good idea to jump onto the U.S. Patent and Trade Office website and just run that name through the search to see if there are other businesses with that name. It's a national database. One reason that we encourage businesses to do it, even if they don't have national expansion plans yet, is is that it helps you pick a name that you can grow with. Sometimes you grow in ways that you don't anticipate. And if you have a name that can be trademarked, you can grow with that name and not need to change it. Doing that kind of search also helps you to see if there's another national business. If there's a national business that might have a name that's similar to yours, that might then come and ask you not to use that name. So looking into marks and thinking about protecting your marks is a great thing to do as you're setting up your business. Then last, encourage you always to work with attorneys. I put together a list of resources available for pro bono or reduced fee services. Every group on that list is working and focusing with small businesses or nonprofits, and so they are set up to provide you with assistance that is really targeted to the kind of business that you have. Some of the things that attorneys are very helpful for are reviewing contracts and also helping you to identify the risks specific to your business and helping you manage liability. I put here at the very end, and it's also on the resources, it's our clinic website that we encourage you, if you are looking for legal representation, we accept clients 2 semesters in this fall and spring semester. And with that, I'll stop share. I hope I did not go over time.
You perfect. And with a few minutes to spare, actually. And thank you both for all of this great information. We do have some questions in the chat, and so Greg was one of the first ones on the type. So we're gonna let Greg, if you want to come off mute and ask your question.
Oops.
Let's see if Greg is still here. Okay, while we're waiting for Greg, we've got Candace. Candace, do you want to come off mute and ask your question, one of your questions? You know what? I wonder if I have to take them off. We'll see. Well, I have questions while we're trying to figure out what's going on. Let's see here. So one of the questions was, one of the questions that I get all of the time is for small business owners, and which of the legal entities people should use. You know, my preference is because I have 2 LLCs, is because of the LLC, and to me, I was told that the LLC offered the most protection because if I have been sued a few times because I've been in business for a while, but if someone were to sue the company, they sue the company and not me as the person. So that's why I chose the LLC. So you know, what is the normal entity for small businesses?
Well, you're right on point. As where the poll responded, 70% of whom have LLCs. LLC is the most recommended form for small businesses. All of the entities, now the entities that we discussed, the corporations, all also offer the protection against liability, but the LLC is considered to be very flexible because you can choose how you want to be taxed. You don't have to have bylaws. You can put together a company agreement that works for you. And so sometimes for a single member LLC, which has just one member, we will put together a 1-page company agreement. So it can be quite streamlined, and LLCs are most highly recommended. Now, what often happens, so for businesses that are creating entities, but are thinking that they might want to bring in a large number of investors, they are often encouraged, and this is really true in the tech industry, they are encouraged to form C corporations when they are ready to go for seed funding or to bring in sort of venture capital investors. And so one reason for this is that when you want to bring in a large number of investors within an LLC, all of the members have to approve when you add a new member, whereas within a corporation, they can just trade shares. But for starting businesses, LLC is the most highly recommended form and is often the company choice of form. So you were definitely right, spot on when you made those choices for your businesses.
Awesome. And Eric Coleman had a question that's pertaining to the LLC. So we'll jump to his. And it appears that I have to give you permission. So Eric, do you want to ask your question? Oops, hold on. Let me try it again.
Hello, can you hear me?
There we
Yes.
go.
Perfect.
Hey, my question was, what do you need to do? What are the steps that need to happen to keep your LLC current? I know that there are some things that have to be done, but I don't remember everything.
Yeah, that's a great question. So as a filing entity, I keep saying filing entity to distinguish those that had to file a certificate of formation. Because you formed an entity, you are on the radar of the Texas Comptroller's Office. I think you probably get a letter and email within 7 days saying, great, you're a new tax-paying entity within Texas. Happy to meet you. So even though you, hopefully, I hope you're making more than $1 million, so you do have to pay taxes. But if you're not making $1 million yet, you still have to file what's called a no tax due form. And that's due every May 15th with the Texas Comptroller's Office. So one of the main things an LLC has to do is make sure that it's filing a form with the Comptroller's Office annually, either a tax form or no tax due form. Now, what you need to do really depends on whether you have a company agreement and what it states. What we recommend that all of our clients do is at least once a year, sit back, and I think it would work really well. So, Dr. Miles laid out the business model. So let's say you've done this for a year. Sit down at least once a year and look back at your decisions, the decisions that you made for your LLC, and also look back at the distributions that you made to yourself as the owner of an LLC. Just kind of list them and put them into a simple resolution to say, I, as the owner of this LLC, made these decisions and it was in the best interest of the LLC. We offer our clients a simple template that all they have to do is go in and list it out. And so it's a good idea to go back and document important decisions. So what I mean is, let's say you decided to enter into a new sector of business, which included a new type of contracting. It's good to have it's good to document that in a resolution. Let's say you decided to enter into a commercial lease. Now, if you're doing that, your landlord may ask for one, but that's also a good thing to put into a resolution. But if you do that once a year and then really make sure that as you transfer money between the entities, there is a record of that. So for example, for some of our clients in that last resolution, we'll say, just take a snapshot of your QuickBooks and just make a statement that the distributions that you made to yourself, the person as the member of the LLC, were in the best interest of the LLC. So with a few simple steps, that's all you need to do to really remain current with your LLC. You don't have to renew the LLC, but if you don't file that form with the Comptroller's Office, if you don't respond to them when they request the late files, they will go in and do what they call an administrative dissolution, which then it's not fatal. You can go back and reinstate it, but it's a few extra steps.
I've had that as well. Okay.
Yeah, it's lots of nonprofits have had it. The good thing to know that it's out there is that it's easy to overcome. So you make a mistake, you just fix it.
Yeah, and I think like you said, there is no fee if you file it on time.
Right.
$50 late fee if you don't. So.
Absolutely. There is some of the tax preparers are often at the ones that are connected to foundation, the community tax centers connected to community foundations, for example, those tax preparers are trained to help owners who have single member LLCs file the forms. So many of the public tax preparers, preparation services are prepared to help the business side of things as well.
I'm sorry, Dr. Miles, did you have some feedback? I didn't know.
No, I didn't say anything.
Okay. All right. So Gregory, we're going to try it again to get your questions in there.
There we go. Everybody can hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
we got you.
All right, perfect. Yeah, I was a little confused. I'm like, there's usually a button there. No, just a quick question. As far as bouncing between a sole proprietorship and a general partnership, being a photographer is my main business. I have a friend of mine or a cousin of mine actually helped me on some shoots. Like last year, did a couple of weddings, couldn't do it by myself, or I actually brought in another photographer to help me out as far as under my name. So would it be wise in that sense to stay a sole proprietor since it was just a one-time thing, or if it's going to be a constant thing, knowing, hey, this year, 2021, more weddings are going to be under my belt. They're going to be helping me out more. Switching from that sole proprietor to a general partnership for, kind of paperwork and stuff there. Would it be possible to do that? And second part of it, would it be wise to do that?
Yeah, so I'm going to ask Dr. Miles to help me weigh in on the wise part too. So it is possible to do that, but coming back to some of the questions that Dr. Miles had in terms of the wise is that how you see your business? Because an alternative to that is to actually bring them on as an independent contractor. So photography, the kind of artistic creative work that you're talking about, is one that is frequently done as an independent contractor. So you, as a sole proprietorship, could enter into an agreement with them and do that a number of times over the year. So partnership is not your only option there. What you do want to do is make sure that you have a written agreement, and you really want to talk about who's going to own the resulting photography. Who is going to copyright it? Are they going to sign it to you? That wise question. I think I would also kick it to Dr. Miles to weigh in on, how do you think about when you want to bring in a partner? Like, how do you take good working relationship and take it to the next level? When do you do it?
That is fantastic. I love the way you approach that question. And so what I would say is, I'd love to know a little bit more about when you do bring this person in. Is when you bring this person in, are you two people, are both of you shooting at the same time? Or are you bringing this person in when you can't be there? Or how does it work?
Well, it's kind of both. With weddings, of course, I've done small weddings thanks to COVID, so that's something I can do. I've literally done weddings at McKinney Falls where it's literally the bridegroom, the officiant, and that's it. I've actually done weddings where it was about 150 people. Kind of hard to keep COVID in mind there, but in that sense, I did bring a second photographer in since I knew we were both going to be shooting at the same time. We did have that agreement. We actually signed a document saying, hey, this is going to be the property of Tailored Eye Photography, even though she's capturing them at the end of it, and she fully understood at the same time. So at the end result, the only reason why I picked my friend as photographer, because she's actually pretty good as far as I am. So I didn't want to have someone using my name and actually providing a subpar service. So I made sure to take that into account. But this year, hopefully with COVID kind of easing up, it might be more weddings. I've actually got 2 on the books already. But yeah, it may be more often this year as opposed to someone I have kind of on call. I'd say like, hey, I have a big wedding coming up. Here's the date and time, can you make it? So it's going to be more prevalent than it was in my beginning years, I'd say.
Okay. And so how do you split the proceeds, or do you split the proceeds?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Essentially, when it comes to the second shooters, we essentially thinking of it, depending on if they're the whole wedding, there's usually like a 50-50 split if they're doing the editing as well. If it's just, hey, you're there shooting and they're just giving me the raw images, they're just there to help capture them. It's usually something we come to agreement. It's like, hey, how long do you want to spend there? Do you mind doing this? We kind of come to an agreement like, 25, 75. It's all based on how long the wedding is, what needs to be shot, if they're going to be, editing or not, or if it's all going to fall back on me once it's all said and done.
Yeah, well, the beauty is that that you've got something worthwhile and something complex enough to discuss with perhaps some counsel. And of course, Dr. Martinez has also given you lots of resources that I'll be able to chat with, because what you're doing is, it sounds like you've got intellectual property when you've got this individual coming in as a second shooter. And it also sounds like, you know, when you're splitting 50-50, it sounds a little different than just someone who's working for you. So in one instance, this person sounds like more like an independent contractor. In the other instance, it sounds more like a partnership. So again, you know, I hesitate to give this type of cogent, you know, advice online like this, but certainly there's some other aspects to your business that may require that you take a moment and seek a little bit of counsel.
Will do.
Absolutely. And if you're thinking about the partnership, then again, you might want to think about an LLC, which one of the benefits, you know, we talked about the partnership where both partners are agents and can bind the other by their actions. In an LLC, each member can be protected from the personal debts of the other member. In those resources, so for example, our clinic is almost ending, but especially since you're in a creative business, one of those resources is Texas Accountants and Lawyers for the Arts. And they are a pro bono program, and so they operate all year with a special focus on the creative industry. So that is one to consider, as well as the micro enterprise program that's listed there as well is another great one that is available year round for sure. I'm sitting there thinking, rats, if this were January, I'd say fill out the application so we can work with you this semester.
Yeah,
Nice. I'll definitely take up on that this time.
And finally, the good news is that, you know, you and your partner, as it were, are friends today. And the thing you want to make certain is that you're still friends tomorrow. And so that's why legal counsel will help and give you both an idea of where the lines are drawn. And, you know, the good thing about a contract is when you spend the time on the front end to design it, you just put it in a drawer and you should never need it. But when things go wrong, you've sat down, you've thought about it beforehand, and both parties have understood it, and then the games begin sometimes.
Absolutely true. Cannot agree more.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Candace, would you like to ask your question? One of your questions?
Yes. First, thank you so much for doing this. It came at a really auspicious time, just as I was restructuring. I do educational consulting, which means schools hire me to come in and work with their teachers. And a lot of what I'm helping teachers with are, you know, general best practices, but some of it is my own that I've developed over 20 plus years in the classroom and as an instructional coach. How do I protect my ideas? Like if I want to quantify them in a workbook or that sort of thing, how do I protect that?
So a couple of ways to that. So a workbook, as you've described, if you've assembled a workbook that you're sharing, and that could be in digital form, it could be a series of PowerPoints that you share, that already it's protected by common law copyright the minute that you create it. You could put that C in a circle to share with others that you are protecting this, and you could also consider registering it with the U.S. Copyright Office. There's a link to that as well in the resources. And one other aspect of that to think about is if you are sharing some of that curriculum, some of that workbook, or pieces of that workbook as you're engaging customers, you might think about the trade secrets part of it. Like if someone wants to see your workbook to determine whether or not they want to invite you in to come and work at a school, you might protect that aspect of the relationship with a simple NDA in which they're agreeing to keep this information confidential as well. That might be another way to do it.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, I'd love to be able to share this, is that, you know, there's a distinction between the what and the how. Mm-hmm. And typically the trade secret and what needs to be protected is more about the how and not always the what. Mm-hmm. So you may want to give thought to that and how you're putting together and what you're putting in your workbook and whether or not that workbook includes both. And when you're talking with prospective clients or, in general, the what is something that I would counsel you to say, yeah, sure, share the what, but let's tell them that they, you're in business for the how.
Okay, thank you.
That's a great point.
Candace, you had a question about a DBA versus LLC, or would you like to ask that question?
Yes, thank you. So I went to Travis County back when you would go to Travis County back in 2015, and I got the DBA, and I've just kind of been operating like that, right? And then the last year kind of got serious because we were at home and people were like, okay, we really need help now. So one of the things is I'm at the point where I have no more bandwidth. I've got to invite people on. I've got to train other teachers to do the same thing. So that's why we had looked at, S-corp or LLC, and looks like I'm deciding on that. But I have the DBA. When I go and file my certificate of formation, do I need another DBA, or is that wrapped up in the paperwork for my certificate of formation?
So the two are completely separate.
Okay.
You will need a DBA so when you create your entity, if you're able to when you pick your entity, you'll have to make sure that nobody else has that name, with that exact name, in order to be able to file your paperwork. If you are able to choose the name that you want to use as your public face name and you do your business under that name, you don't need a DBA. But if for some reason you don't get to register your company under the brand name, and you still want to use that brand name, you will need a DBA for the company.
Okay.
But for now, when you file that DBA, and DBAs expire after 10 years. And so you don't have to worry about that DBA at all. You could, if you wanted to, you could go in and withdraw it if you want to, but if you don't, it will expire within 10 years.
Okay, great, thank you.
And Candace, just to let you know, we do have some, as Dr. Martinez said, there are some pro bono lawyers that will assist you. So if you shoot me an email or just message me, and before you make that step, take that step, we might be able to assist in that, so that there's fees involved. So
wonderful, thank you.
No worries. Also, Arquette Holmes, would you like to ask your question? I think it's Arquette.
Looks like she is still muted.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My Janelle Custom Design is set up as a DBA, and it's 100% woman-owned, minority-owned. My trucking company is 51% owned by my spouse and 49% by me. However, we want to be able to get government contracting for either minority-owned or woman-owned. So can we restructure the LLC?
Absolutely, and really encourage you to work with an attorney to do that, but you absolutely can restructure the LLC.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see.
And when you do that too, you also will take another look at your business model and the template, because now your value proposition may change.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
I think Brigitte Davis, you had a question. Would you like to ask your question?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you for coming on today. The question I wanted to ask, I am a realtor, and I also wanted to open up a franchise. So I just wanted to know if most of these rules apply also to a franchise.
So in terms of creating entities, many of the same rules will apply, but franchise have very specific rules and processes that they have to follow as they unfold. So really encourage you to work with an attorney to do that. There are multiple, what typically a franchise has to do is put together a set of disclosures and other information that it will offer to potential franchisees. And so for that, the law is very technical. So really, really encourage you to work with an attorney for that.
Okay, thank you.
I didn't see any other questions in the chat. If you have any other questions, let's see, there's one that maybe. Lisa Davis has one. I am slow on this, on the draw. So Lisa.
Hi, thank you so much for all of the wonderful and helpful information. Many of us have probably heard it before, but seems like you hear it again and it hits differently depending on where you are on your journey. So thank you for both of you for your presentations, for all of your presentations. So I think I'm getting pretty clear on the benefits of forming an LLC and why it's so highly recommended for most small businesses. But I don't seem to be clear that it's always required. And I know it's like crazy to say, I'm not going to get sued. Obviously, that's naive, right? You never know if you're going to get sued, right? But let's say you're in the super, super early stages. My question is there a circumstance or a type of business arrangement where no designation is really necessary?
So in some ways, that's true for most businesses. I mean, also a lot of this really depends on your personal circumstances.
Mhm.
And you brought up the issue of lawsuit. There are some lawsuits that an LLC won't protect you from.
Okay.
If you were driving a car for your own business and you were in a car accident, that's not a debt of the company. That's going to come to you. So it won't, so an entity alone doesn't protect you from everything. And we often encourage, depending on the circumstances, sometimes we encourage some of our clients to remain sole proprietors for a period of time. One rule that is one situation that sometimes is considered a bright line rule is when you bring on an employee, because an entity will protect you from the torts of your employee. So if it's your employee who's driving the car that has the accident, it's not going to come against you personally. So there are some situations, but that said, there are many, many sole proprietors that operate and have employees. Sole proprietors can also have employees. Sometimes, and I think Dr. Miles can weigh on to this as well, sometimes clients tell us that when it's a toss-up, like it's not clear that an LLC would really benefit them in a way. Sometimes they tell us that they feel it gives them a more professional public facing brand. And so some of them make that choice. And then sometimes there are certain types of competitions or scholarships that are available to businesses that are in the form of an entity. I'll bet that Dr. Miles has some good advice on this as well.
I haven't dealt with it as extensively perhaps as you have, but I do know from a perspective of an entity, contests, things of that nature, when they look at a legitimate business and considering whether or not the business is legitimate, they do want a designation of some sort. It just makes it look more attractive, I think, as you have already pointed out. So some of it's window dressing, but most of it is around the liability perspective. And when you start growing, those two things become more important. Not only what you look like, but also how you're protected to take care of you.
Antoinette has a question. I'm gonna she can't ask it, but basically her question was regarding resources for 501c3, and I know you guys have resources as well, and we will also I'll make sure that I center over those resources that you gave us, Dr. Martinez. So I'm gonna, because of time, I'm going to go ahead and go to Sharnetta's Fowler's question, because it's one that I'm curious about as well. Her question is there a big difference between an LLC and a PLLC? And she said, I was advised to do a PLLC, but I'm not sure which way to go.
So a PLLC is for a professional type of business. So if for certain professions that are licensed professions within the state of Texas, the right form for them is the PLLC. That's the one that they can operate.
And the one of the last question, do you need a DBA if owning a franchise?
So with a franchise, someone will need a DBA. So for example, it may be that the original franchise is operated by the person who created a company with that name, but the franchisees down the line are maybe operating a company that is not the name, so that is not their legal registered name for their entity, so they may need a DBA. You don't have to have a DBA specifically because you're a franchisee. It depends on the name of the business and whether it is your actual legal name within the state of Texas.
Well, we've had some great questions and a lot of great interactions. So we really appreciate you guys, our speakers for sure, Dr. Martinez and Dr. Miles. Thank you guys for taking the time to share your knowledge and your advice with our community. We'll definitely make sure that they have copies of the slides and also the resources that you guys have provided for them. We're so excited to, just to be able to offer these classes. People, there we go. Sorry, I think Tequila was trying to mute me earlier, so. So we're so excited. We don't want to keep you guys long. Our class is ending at 7:30, but we appreciate both of our speakers for helping us to understand how to set up your business. We understand this is very basic, and a lot of folks are already in business. However, you may be in business, but you may not be. You may not have some of these things, provided. And so we're just excited and really glad that you guys were able to shed light on what's good and what's bad, as well as our sponsor. Thank you so much, Brandon, for being here with us and sharing, and as well as Comerica Bank for understanding and recognizing the value of Black businesses in the community, and also helping with the grants at the end of the 4 weeks. So we're real excited about that. And, we are giving 10 grants, 10 grants at the end of the 4 weeks. However, we do have resources for you guys if you are still looking to, as Dr. Martinez and Dr. Miles said, if you want to change your business from a DBA to a LLC or whatever, we do have attorneys and other resources that will we'll share so that you can and take care of those things as well, and obviously to kind of offset some of the costs for you. So we will have some resources for you for attending. So with that, I don't know, Dr. Martinez, Dr. Miles, do you have any last words before we sign off?
I'll start and I'll give Dr. Miles the last word. Just thank you so much for inviting us. Legal planning is part of your planning. You had great questions. You're thinking about what you need to remain in compliance, and definitely agree with what Dr. Miles said, that as you're starting your founding, you should think a little bit about the end in mind. So think about growth as well as what you need today.
Absolutely, and thank you, Dr. Martinez. And also, again, I started off our conversation by saying thank you to all of you who've joined us. And I'll end it by saying that as well. But make certain that again, the product and service you offer is repeatable, sustainable, valuable, and predictable. And the way you do that is by making sure you have your eyes on this one-page business model. And when things change, you need to adjust the model.
And we'll leave our last words to our sponsor, Brandon.
Hey, thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. Professor Martinez, Dr. Miles, excellent info. Please, everybody, like I said earlier, take this info, use it, pass it along to your friends. We really want for you all to be successful. And thank you so much again, Anita.
Hey, we'll see you guys next Wednesday night at same time, same place. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.